One, two,
Standing
go.
by. You know it.
Here we go.
Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz,
And I'm Steve Morey.
and we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in. You'll notice there's just two of us tonight. Brother Brian is still on his Japanese excursion, and unfortunately, Caleb had some family matters, and he won't be joining us tonight either. But you got the two of us, or you got
Just
one
us.
and a half, because if you can hear me right now, I'm half dead. I've been sick the entire week. Knock wood, not COVID. Got those nice little Binax lollipops telling me one strip, but it's been a rough couple days, and I just want to feel better. I just want to feel better.
I get you. It's it always sucks, especially. I mean, on a recording week, yeah, but any other time, especially after having 2 years of trying not to get sick. Well, now 3 years of trying not to get sick, and now like the sicknesses have come back.
Yeah,
For a couple of years, a lot of people were. I don't want to say spoiled because I don't think anybody was spoiled with quarantine and stuff, but with all the extra precautions and not going anywhere and doing all these things, like most people did not get sick at all for any kind of sickness unless you got COVID. But now all the other stuff is back.
yeah. There's another noro strain that's out there now.
Mm-hmm.
The flu this year was especially tough for
Yep.
some people. I was sick in late October, and I've been sick on this go round, but that's been it.
Yeah.
The entirety of 2020, the entirety of 2021, I was not sick at all, and I liked it. I like masking for me in certain contexts is going to be it. But I got sick, and I know how I got sick because it's been like the weather's been improving a little bit. But on
Mhm.
Sunday morning, I went out to run errands, and I put on a jacket that just wasn't heavy enough. And I knew it when I felt that little tickle in the throat when I pulled the car in at home, and I was like, "Oh, god damn it." And I thought it was going to be like my classic 60-hour cold, in the back of the throat, then up and out the nose. And it still
Everybody's
feels
favorite.
that, but it's just a bad version of it, and it's sticking around a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a little washed out, folks. I've looked better. I was having a good hair day till I had the fucking headset on, so I'm doing my best. It's not going to be as long a show this time around. We're going to try to keep it to around an hour, which means it'll probably go over an hour a little bit, but it's not going to be one of our 2 hour spectacles because the circumstances just aren't in place. But we do have a special show tonight because we are talking about Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which we both saw in the movie theaters over the last few days. And we're going to tell you about what we thought of the film. And we're also going to tell you about some comic books that if you are digging Billy and Mary and the other members of the Shazam family, that we can kind of point you towards if you want to keep that journey going.
Yeah.
If you did enjoy the film and want to read some stuff from the format it's originally created.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. The thing is, like, I'm not even hopped up on meds right now because I'm waiting for this to be over to take the night meds. Basically, there's nothing left in the tank, brother. I'm just trying to go and like, let's all hope the mute button works because let me tell you, when I cough, it's like post-apocalyptic. It's really it's so bad. It's such a bad sound. So but we felt it was important, given some of the specific circumstances to the reaction of this film, that we
Yeah,
wanted to get this out. So we're here and we should be Shazamming with you tonight.
exactly. Shazam to the Shazamaning.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well, why
I,
don't you
I
just start it off there, Steve? You're always so deft at encapsulating the plot.
I
And
try to. I'm going to try to keep it short because I like to go into detail. I'm not going to do that right now. We are going to be talking about spoilers, so just so you're aware, spoilers are going to happen. They're going to come up in the conversation when we talk about our feelings of this movie and different things that we like. But right now, just talking about the basic premise of the film. Basically,
before we start, let's just give some of the technical bits
oh
about
yeah,
this. You know that this film is directed by David F. Sandberg,
yep,
who was the director of the first Shazam film in 2019. I can't believe it's
hmm
2019. That feels much more recent than that for
yeah,
some reason. And there's a lot of cast repeaters in it.
hmm
And again, this is the 12th film in the DC Extended Universe series of films. And I think some of that has something to do with the muted reaction to it.
yeah.
And well, why don't we first talk about the plot, and then we can talk about the box office situation and some other issues then.
Yeah. So basically, this is the second Shazam centered film, and it takes place, following uh, the outcome of the first film a few years later. Billy Batson is on the cusp of graduating high school. He's just about to age out. He's almost 18 from the foster system. And that's creating some anxiety for him, considering his place in the family. And at the same time, another family is making a move that they've been waiting for several thousands of years, and that is the Daughters of Atlas have discovered that the staff that had essentially sealed off the realm of the gods and magic from the human realm has been broken. See the first film, and decide to reclaim it, and also basically the power of magic and the power to dominate the human realm. And throughout the film, the daughters of Atlas and Shazam and his family are trying, to not just keep each other together, but also to either, uh, like the daughters of Atlas, keep magic for themselves and use it to dominate the human world, or to save the human world from the forces of magic that have been under control for thousands of years. Um, there's a lot that goes on in this. There's a lot of the anxiety of Shazam, of the Billy Batson character, and his place in this family, and his worry that things might turn out for the worst if he doesn't do everything he can to protect them and keep everybody together. And then also, you've got the individual members of the Shazam family, the other kids who have also been given powers, have their own issues and their own things going on too. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of family dynamics that are discussed, as well as the idea of like growing up and being independent and trusting in oneself and one's family and etc. Um, but yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of cool cameos. There were a few cameos. I think one in particular that was spoiled in the like last burst of media promotion of this film, with a certain Themysciran making a big appearance. But there's also, for better or worse, and again we'll go into it, there is some more connective tissue to the DC extended universe that's revealed in post-credit scenes that now might not really have the impact that they would have if we all didn't know what we do know now about the future of the DC films.
Mhm.
So, I think that the action in this is pretty spectacular. There's some great set pieces. The special effects do not look cheap,
At all.
for
At
at
all.
all. No, I think they're done well. The action is done sparingly. Like there are very specific set pieces where it's very cool and very important to have really awesome effects, and then there are also some quiet moments and some like just basically like you know the uh the Shazam family hanging out, just doing what they normally do, and that in itself is cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, some great actors in this. I mean, we've got Zach Levy reprising his role as the adult Shazam, and Asher Angel as young Billy, as well as Jack Dylan Grazer as Freddie Freeman, and of course Adrian Brody as his alter ego, which is very interesting. We'll talk about kind of like how those appear. But we also have Helen Mirren as Hespera, and Lucy Liu as two of the daughters of Atlas. Lucy Liu's character is Calypso, and there is a third daughter, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Um, but I think it's great. I think Djimon Hounsou makes a reappearance as the Wizard Shazam, and has, I think, a little bit more of a role in this film than he did in the first one. Uh, to I think the benefit of this film. So I just love it. I think everybody did such an amazing job portraying these characters, and I think they were presented very well on screen with a few criticisms on from my perspective.
Going back to what I thought of the film, like I said, I thought it was fun from the word go. It was a great balance of comedy, and also wasn't any moment in that film where I didn't think the stakes were real. Without a doubt, a universal takeover. I thought the actors, with one exception, were all right on the money, and there were things that we didn't have the benefit of in the first film that I thought was great to see. There was this wonderful chemistry between the Wizard and Freddy in this
Yeah.
movie. Wonderful chemistry, and that was something that I think the director saw and just ran with, because I think some of the better lighthearted moments were courtesy of the two of them. There was actually a love story in the middle of it, and I thought that worked to some extent. This wouldn't have been a vehicle that I was expecting that at all. I think the family dynamic on both sides was something that was well thought out and had a tremendous amount of resonance in feeding into the story. You had mentioned the special effects, especially comparing them to what we just had with Quantumania. I
Yeah.
thought this was a much more balanced SFX film. It did not look cheap at all, and this film and the first Shazam did not have the biggest budgets. So
No. No.
w-
These, in fact,
what
weren't
they
these some
what
of the
they
lower budgets for the DC films?
Yes, they have been. One of my nitpicks is because of how good the special effects were. Because I noticed something. Uh, because I do spend a considerable amount of time in Philadelphia, so there's just one thing I got to talk about. Okay, so the Tree of Life, or whatever that fucking thing was, that sprouted out in Citizens Bank Park.
Right.
Conceptually, it was in the wrong place. So Citizens Bank Park is over here. Wells Fargo Center is over here, and Lincoln Financial Field, where the Eagles play, is over here. It should have been where the Eagles played at Lincoln Financial, where it was sprouted up, because when you saw that the roots were plowing through the parking lot, that was the
Hmm.
Wells Fargo Center parking lot, which is directly adjacent in that section. So they just spatially should have flipped them. But the why that had some resonance for me is because last Thursday night I went to see Bruce Springsteen at the Wells Fargo Center. So if that had happened, my car would have been toast.
Oh yeah. Well, I think if it happened and you were in the stadium, you probably would have been toast at that point too.
Yeah,
I'm not
I would
talking
have
about
been.
the lightning that happened,
Yeah, I would
at
have
the
been done.
climax. Oh,
In terms of performances, for me, the weak link was actually Zachary Levi,
mm,
because I thought there was a tremendous imbalance with how. Let me see how I should put this. One of the unfortunate things is Asher Angel is not in the film as Billy that much.
no.
Certainly nowhere near the level he was in the first film. And they really felt like two different characters in this.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought Zachary Levi was, at times just a dope. And when you did have Billy on screen, there just seemed to be a lot more confidence and a lot more understanding and a lot more maturity. And it did feel too much of an imbalance with that.
Mm,
I wish they had tightened that up a bit. In the first film, I bought the dichotomy a lot more. I really
yeah.
did. In this one, though, I would have liked to have seen Shazam, which I guess we can call him now. Um, I would have liked to have seen Shazam be the person that has matured 2 or 3 years from the first time we saw him, and I didn't get that
Yeah.
sense at all. I got it with Billy, but I didn't get it with Shazam at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and you could kind of see the reverse actually happening with Freddie Freeman and his, Captain Thunderbolt or whatever his
Yeah.
character's name is that he calls himself. There's very little of Adrian Brody in this. There are a few key moments where Adrian Brody's, uh, the adult Freddie
Yeah.
Freeman character comes out, does his, superheroing. Um, but it's really Jake Dylan Grazer who
And there's a
carries a
plot-driven
lot.
reason for that. There's a
Yeah,
plot-driven
and
reason for that. Yeah.
exactly, and we could talk about that. I mean, the staff of the gods, part of what it does is it absorbs magic, and so it can absorb back the powers that Shazam has given his family. And so Freddie Freeman, of course, is his powers are taken away pretty early on in the movie, and so he's basically himself
Mhm.
most of the film, and that's where we get the interactions with the Wizard Shazam and that kind of dynamic there. But also, it's as himself that he impresses one of the daughters of Atlas enough that she sees something in him that possibly is just indicative of humanity being something that doesn't need to be destroyed or damaged. And she does, like you said, you talked about the love story that was unexpected and it's believable.
Mhm.
Almost. There is a line in there, and I think it's great because it's comics, and this is something
Yeah.
that makes sense for those of us who know that it's comics. Is that they they talk about the fact that hey, we're about the same age, and Anne looks at him and says, "Well, I'm actually 6,000 years old." And you're only like almost 18, and he's like, oh. And of course later on Rosa comments like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, my son, what is it with our sons and dating older women? um and that's a pretty big age gap, 18 and 6,000. But they kind of explain it away. It's like, oh well, emotionally she's about the same age as he is. Um, but he has some of the best moments in this, and that's where facing the fear dragon and just doing it, sheer force of will, facing down Lucy Liu both times. He defeated her just before, or he's was able to resist her because he's such a strong, willful character, and we get to see a lot more of that than we do get to see Asher Angel's Billy Batson
Mhm.
character. We see Shazam kind of being dopey and goofy and doing his things, which I love, but he doesn't really have the big emotional impactful moments or isn't really allowed that much on screen except for as Billy Batson. There is an Asher Angel Billy Batson moment that's very emotionally impactful,
Yep.
but it's small, it's short, and that's about it, and you barely see the rest of the movie. But I loved everybody else. The supporting cast in this is great. All of the
Yep.
supporting cast members, the child versions as well as the adult versions, are wonderful. And I'll run through them really quick because I do want to give them their props. You've got Megan Good and Faith Herman as Darla. You've got Ross Butler and Ian Chen as Eugene. And I think I think a lot of bears are very much into this. DJ Cotrona as Pedro, as adult Pedro, and then Jovan Armandez as young Pedro, who does actually get a pretty fun moment that's funny, so a little bit heartfelt as well when
Mhm.
he gets to come out. And there's that's I love the way it was done too. It was a big laugh as well as like, oh, um, that's just really great. And then of course I want to talk about her, and I'm going to talk about her more in the comics. But Grace Carolyn Curry's Mary doesn't get enough time to shine in this, and I think she should because Mary is a pretty dynamic character,
Yeah.
and she's the one who has the maturity. She's the one out of all the Shazam family who is the one who has the most emotional and intellectual maturity to really kind of navigate what it's like to be a superhero and a person and have responsibilities and not
Right.
just go around like, I want to punch bad guys and save people. That's great. That's wonderful. But you also have to be responsible to yourself and your family in a way that doesn't mean just like punching bad guys. And she does have some great moments in here. where
Mhm.
she mentions that. But I think you know she could have deserved a little bit more, just like the
Yeah,
Billy
but it's
Batson could have
also
deserved a little
really
more.
hard with a cast this big
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
properly
Oh,
balance it,
absolutely,
and I know they tried, and
absolutely
God knows what got cut out,
true.
because you do get the sense that they tried to do that,
Hmm.
but there was always going to be an imbalance, just
Yeah,
because the cast is that big.
and I mean, when you've got Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu like chewing up scenery as the villains, like you got to give them time to time to shine, and they did. And I think that there was enough nuance, at least with Helen Mirren's character,
Hmm.
um, that you did have a sense of their real goals there. And Lucy Liu, of course, doing like the real hard villain turn.
Yeah,
You know,
but even with her, you can understand her justification.
oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you don't agree with it, but you can understand where somebody would have been moved to that type
Mhm.
of determination.
Vengeance and vindictiveness.
Yeah.
I love the design of the mythological creatures that
Mhm.
attack Philly. The Cyclops and the Minotaurs and my favorite use, and I have told multiple people this. My favorite use of product placement in a family film since Reese's Pieces and E.T. Uh, Skittles Taste the Rainbow with those giant monstrous unicorns made me laugh and smile so much. And I know that some of the families around me had a hard gasp in that following scene where they're riding and Darla's like, "Take that, motherfucker!" And it's
Yeah.
just, with the F obviously cut off. But
Yeah.
I just was like, this is great. If I had seen this as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old kid, I would have been jumping up in my seat and
Right.
going like,
Right.
"Yeah!"
And that was one
Um,
of the most comic booky moments that I thought
yes,
worked so well, and especially since it was
absolutely,
Darla led, and she was the one who wasn't fearing
absolutely.
what they were potentially responsible for. And another wonderful like comic booky moment, the revelation of like, yeah, this is kind of Billy's fault. Uh, you know, in breaking the staff. I mean, he didn't mean to, but that set everything into motion there. Uh,
I
but I just thought it was such a great balance. I mean, like, there are moments in that opening sequence in the museum in Athens that horrific.
oh yeah,
Some of the stuff that went down, and you can balance that with a sentient pen. I mean,
Steve.
it's Steve, and I just thought it was a really well balanced film on the lines of, and don't get all like she's a turf yelling at me, of the best of the Harry Potter films.
Yeah,
It,
no,
it really had that type of balance and seamlessness.
it's very much. It gives me a feeling of maybe the third film where there's that to me I think was the most filmic out of all the Harry Potter movies, where there's enough like darkness there, but there's also a lot of like
They're still
fun.
kids. Yeah,
And yeah, and they're still
still
kids, so
kids.
there's that sarcasm and jokiness that happens even though all these dark terrible things are happening around them. And the same thing here. I mean, I think when they're hanging out in the Rock of Eternity and they've basically made it into a kid's crash pad, Pedro, or Shazam Pedro, basically constantly snacking on stuff. He's always eating. If you notice in every
Mhm.
scene where they're in the Rock of Eternity, he's always eating something, which is like, okay, I get it. He's a chunky kid who's now like a super huge muscle bear. But you're like, oh, that's cute. Like they do a good job of just embodying sort of the childish characters that
Mhm.
they're supposed to be, the adult versions of. Um,
Mhm.
and it looks like a lot of fun. Um, I just I really enjoy this a lot. I enjoyed the cameo of Wonder Woman.
Mhm.
Um,
I also think with the last push marketing campaign and them
yeah,
anticipating a fairly low opening, which did bear out to be true. If that was going to get a couple more asses in the seats, and do it.
yeah,
It's already in some of the toy marketing, so I understand their rationale behind spoiling that. It would have been wonderful if you didn't anticipate it, but that's
right.
also a second out of a 2 hour and 10-minute film.
It's
So
true, and the sort of the goofy, like the fake out moment when he's on a date with Wonder Woman in Paris, and
mhm,
she gets, or at least her head gets morphed into Djimon Hounsou's Wizard
yeah,
Shazam, trying to send him a message in his dream. That got a lot of laughs in the
yeah,
theater I was in
and
as
a
well.
wonderful tip of the hat to the first film and its bumper scene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the big surprise for me, and I'm glad that it wasn't spoiled. I did see it. I did see it the Thursday night.
I saw
Opening
it
night.
Saturday. I saw it
I
Saturday.
So nobody had spoiled that moment in the second of the was it the second? Yeah, I guess it
It's
was
the mid credits. Yeah,
no, yeah, the
the mid
second
credits.
mid credits sequence where John Economos and forget her name, both from Peacemaker, show up to recruit him for the Justice Society, and they're like, "Why just and just the jokiness and the repartee, the dialogue, and that was fun and made me hopeful that maybe James Gunn will kind of take that as sort of like yeah, I guess we could keep him, we could bring him in and do something with him,
Yeah,
maybe a
her
little
name is
minimal.
Amelia Harcourt.
Amelia Harcourt, oh my god,
Yeah,
I
I
just
would not have remembered that without looking either.
I know,
But
I
so
just
Economos, you
I
never forget that name. Um,
because it's silly. But I loved it, and I'm so glad that they made it. And I am sad to hear that uh, David Sandberg, who directed, basically he said, like, this is it. I'm not doing superhero movies anymore after this.
mhm.
Was received so poorly by some critics and of course in the box office, because you could tell that he really believed in this movie too,
Yeah, and
and everybody
I
who's in
think
this
his
movie is really.
belief
Yeah.
was well warranted. I mean, I think we both have the ability to pick off the top of our heads 10 movies that outgrossed this by miles that did not deserve its box office, where this one is struggling. And I hope it
Yeah.
gets a little bit more momentum. Usually where a movie opens, you double that, and that's kind of it's gross. So
Mhm.
even at the top end, it's going to be a bomb. And
Yeah.
Warner's desperately needs a hit. All of their franchises have busted. I mean,
Well,
the Batman made money,
yeah.
but you've had Black Adam, you've had Magic Mike was a bust, you've had that Matrix film was a bust, you've had, and I'm talking financially, I'm not talking creatively. Don't worry, don't yell.
Yeah.
And for reasons that I think are outside of the quality of the film, Fantastic Beasts as well
Yeah.
underperformed. So it's just amazing me that like can't get a break on any of these films as a hit.
Well,
Elvis was a hit. Yeah,
yeah, Elvis was a hit. I think that there's a lot of stuff with Warner Brothers where there's this image of corporate flailing. And you would think that a Disney owned franchise would just be as corporate could possibly be, because Disney is the embodiment of pure entertainment corporation, you
yeah.
know, groupthink. This is what the kids like. This is what will make us money. And Warner Brothers, to contrast with that, just seems like they're just, I don't know. We want to involve ourselves, but then we want to screw. We don't want to screw things up, and we want
Yeah,
to. We
it
want to.
it's
I
strange
don't
because I
know.
do feel that they did have free reign with this. I don't
Yeah.
think they were limited. There have been
No.
situations in the past with Warner Brothers films. I think the most egregious example of a superhero film made by committee was Green Lantern.
Yeah.
I think they learned their mistake, and a lot of the Marvel movies have learned their mistake.
Yeah.
The Incredible Hulk. That second half is the director didn't make it. Marvel made,
Yeah.
and I think when they saw how that didn't work two times in a row, you know, Thor was Thor's story, and the majority of those films weren't encumbered by that, for better or
Mhm.
worse. It bothers me because this film deserves better. It deserves better reviews than it received. I
Mhm.
don't understand some of the negative comments that have been levied towards it because they're dynamics that I don't see in operation in the film. I just don't see it.
Right.
I don't see it being overlong. I thought it was a perfect length. I just don't see validity in a lot of the criticisms that are being levied. I also do think, and this is something we haven't talked about, is since there is this reboot, happening with the
Mhm.
DC films. I'm wondering if some people stay away thinking, well, this doesn't really matter. You know, they're just going to burn off. I don't know how many people follow films that closely as we do, that
Yeah.
we know what's ahead. There certainly seems to be a lot more organic buzz for The Flash than there ever was for this. I'm just surprised because the first film did well enough that and had a good enough reputation. And God knows, I mean, if you ever are switching channels between TNT and some of those other channels, I mean, this is like Hellboy was a few years ago. It's always
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
I
just think it deserved better box office and better reviews than it received.
yeah, and to be frank, I don't think the that criticism about like, oh well, Saffron and Gunn have basically come out and said like, ah, none of this really matters. We're rebooting everything anyway. That's really going to, resonate with the large number of just weekend moviegoers.
Yeah,
They're going to look at this and say, I, most of them don't care. They don't care
no,
about the roadmap. That's not something they're out to see a movie that is fun and light, and they can take their kids to, and don't think that that factored into anything. I think it was just it didn't get the promotion that I think it probably needed, in the way that it needed it. I know the Flash was the one that got pushed a lot during the Super Bowl,
mhm.
um, and again, no no publicity is bad publicity. Everything that's been happening with Ezra Miller, with them over the past couple of years, all that craziness. Everyone wants to see a cult leader. Why not?
And
Um,
that's also in terms of that. There have been some anti-vaccination comments coming out of Zachary Levi. They Warner seemed to shut him up really quickly.
yeah,
Uh,
and I don't think that had any effect
I don't think
whatsoever
that
because
had.
that would have happened.
It may have kept a couple people away, but I don't think a lot.
I have a feeling that once it hits HBO Max or Max or whatever they're going to call it, um, in April, I think it's April 17th now,
Yeah,
so
it's
in
very quick. Yeah.
just under a month, that I think it's going to do really well. I think
Mhm.
people are going to be able to see it on their channel or see it on HBO Max, and they'll watch it and they'll enjoy it, and their kids will watch it and then rewatch it. And I think it's going to be one of those movies that has a life outside of the theaters, but not enough to really monetize it,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And I think that that's a shame.
And at my screening, there were a couple of kids, and they were loving it.
Oh yeah.
Not as much as they
Oh,
loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trailer before. I have
ooze,
rarely heard
ooze.
like kids going as crazy as they did with that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that was a big hit, with the kids in my screening too. But the kids really enjoyed this, and there's enough I think in there for adult viewers as well who came for the humor. But there's also like little things like there's um, Annabelle, the Conjuring doll, shows up in just a very short sequence that we've been seeing in the preview, but it's just cute that it's there, and just other things to keep people enticed. And I think I think that enough of this weird sort of like negative cloud buzz
mhm,
is more to keep people away from seeing it. And I
mhm.
don't
And
think that if people give it a chance to watch it, that they would be coming away with the same feeling.
one thing I also have to say, and this is something you can never discount. You really can't discount because we have been shut-ins for the most part for
Yeah,
3 years. This past weekend was a beautiful weekend for many parts of the country,
very
and
true.
that has an effect. It always has an effect on if if it had been pouring in every area of the country, this would have done better. I mean, the leisure behavior of Americans bears that out.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we also are in a culture and have been for 25 years, if not more, that if a movie isn't a hit in its first week, it's really not a hit.
Yeah.
And I just wish some films had the ability to find their legs. It's
The
rare that
culture of film criticism a lot of times, and
yeah.
just the promotional animal that exists out there for marketing doesn't give films like this a chance, because the expectation is if it isn't a blockbuster right out the gate, then it's not worth your time.
Mhm.
I mean, because there's plenty of support that goes for smaller independent films that don't have like the reach that can grassroots be supported, and make 500 times back their budget, but it's because they're not expected to be this giant thing. But if you
Yeah.
have something from a major studio and it's part of a genre that, oh well, they all have to be hits, and if they're not a hit then they're garbage. But I loved it. It makes me smile. I'm going to be
Mhm.
trying to drag Jason to go see it this weekend.
And I have to
Yeah,
say, this is definitely going to be one of those films I return to. I can't
absolutely.
say that for all the DC films.
We got a couple more coming this year too. We've got
Yep.
three. We've got The Flash. We've got Blue Beetle, which I have yet to see any promotional material on other
Mhm.
than one poster. No,
Mhm.
no previews, no nothing, no trailers, no teasers, nothing, and it's pissing
Mhm.
me off.
Oh,
We've
why
also
are you
got.
mad? Why are you offended?
I'm offended by the fact that they're not promoting. They're doing no promotion to it, and
But
I'm like,
sometimes
are they?
holding back the promotion is promotion in and of itself.
It could be, or it could just basically be that they don't believe in it. And when we've seen that kind of thing happen
But
before,
yeah, I don't understand getting personally angry about that.
I'm not personally angry about it. I'm
You
just
just
like, if
said
you
you were
look,
angry.
I am angry. I'm
You
angry about
just
that they're
said you
not
were angry.
giving that as a film studio. If they want
Yeah.
to hit, then they actually have to make sure that they are promoting it like a hit. They're pushing everything out the door for Flash, but
Mhm.
they're not doing anything about Blue Beetle, which I think has a potential to be a very interesting kind of film
Right.
that people might want to see. But I could tell you, I could walk down the street today and nobody knows what that is,
Yeah,
and it's
I
it's going to
agree
be
with
here in
you,
less
but
than 3 months.
at the same token, let's see what transpires with that. There may be
Yeah,
a rationale behind that. They may still be finalizing special effects
man.
so that they can't necessarily show you what they want to show you. That's the kind of like fanboy talk that pisses me off. Like
And it's
you
not even
have,
fanboy talk.
but
I'm
it
just
is,
sort of
Steve.
like,
It
I
is
want to.
because it is a sense of entitlement that like I should have this right now. And I know that wasn't your intention, but
No.
it sure came out that way.
Yeah, and I think honestly, given the fact that if you're a Disney property,
Hmm.
you have had your previews, your teasers, your promotional everything going on for at least a year prior to your film
Hmm.
drop. And Warner Brothers has done that for other films.
Okay, so
So why not this?
what if you were somebody at Warner Brothers and said, "We don't know how Shazam is going to perform, and we
Yeah.
don't know which way to go with Blue Beetle in terms of the marketing. Why don't
Yeah.
we wait to see what the reaction is, and then we'll finalize a plan?"
I
Does
mean,
that sound like something valid to you? Because that's happened time and time again.
absolutely. So what is the lesson they're going to learn from Shazam?
Don't open on a nice weekend. Um,
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not
Hopefully
a
it's not the
marketing.
same lesson they
I'm
learned
not
from
in
Bat.
marketing, so
Yeah, hopefully it's not the same lesson that they
yeah.
learned from Batgirl, and so. Well, anyway, I think we should talk about some comics for Shazam
Sure.
because I'm happy that I saw Shazam 2 and I immediately wanted to read more.
Okay. Well, that's a great effect. That's a great effect that a film should have on you. I probably should go first with my pick
Oh
just
yeah.
because chronologically it goes in time with me is the first out the gate. So if you have a graphic for the cover, I would appreciate if you would put that up there. Yeah, so over the last few years, DC has been putting out these hardcover versions of the Shazam runs that took place in the 70s and 80s. The original run of stories since the character was first licensed by DC in 1972. Encompassed 3 volumes, and I have up here Shazam, the World's Mightiest Mortal, Volume 3. And you'll see the creator credits up there are E. Nelson Bridwell, who was the writer, and Don Newton, who was the artist. Now, through almost all of Shazam's, and initially he was drawn pretty photorealistic in the initial stages in the 40s. And certainly that was the case with Captain Marvel Jr. and Mac Roboy's amazing artwork. But after a point, they tended to cater to kids. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And there were a number of artists, the most notable being Kurt Schaffenberger, who had a very cartoony style and was entrusted with depicting the adventures of the Big Red Cheese, as Captain Marvel was then known as. And it's also kind of funny because for these reissues, this is Mike Cho's work. who's very Darwin Cook-esque, but it kind of belies what's actually with this collection. So in 1978, Shazam was canceled. The actual title was canceled, even though it had been on network television on Saturday mornings for 3 years, and the character had built up a recognition outside of comic books. Let's put it that way. But it was never a really big seller. But they did want to keep the character going for licensing purposes because it was a heavily licensed character in the 70s, and they also did another animated version later on down the road, which was actually where Paul Dini's earliest credits are from, was from that Filmation series. In the comics, though, they decided to do a change up in the artwork. So Don Newton is a sort of forgotten name these days, but he was a fantastic artist. If you can put up one of the three splash pages that I provided you. So again, we were going from a very cartoony situation to something that's a little more in line with Bronze Age sensibilities. So you'll see here with Shazam, you have a very non-cartoony Mr. Talkie Tawny. And this was the art style that was present through the entirety of Shazam's run as backups in World's Finest Comics and then in Adventure Comics Digest, went up to about 83. I also have two other examples here. One nice thing about when the series went to backups is they incorporated more elements into other DC characters. They were confined to their own universe, which was Earth S, but they did bring in Fawcett characters and occasionally quality characters. And you'll see here, if you recognize the character that Freddy is talking to in the bottom two panels, turns out to be his brother, and his brother is Kid Eternity. So E. Nelson Bridwell was really deft at his comic history, first of all, but also of kind of refocusing some of the continuity to give the Shazam family a broader feel. I think I have one more here, and you'll see some other guest stars here in Bullet Man and Bullet Girl. These are characters that have been almost never used since the 1940s. And I think this run of stories in some ways is a better introduction to Bronze Age Shazam than the two volumes before, because the two volumes, again, they're very stocked in that cartoony sense, and there's some like the first 10 issues, there's some god awful stories in there. There's some god awful stories in the first 10 issues of Shazam. But I think by this time they got it right, and it's especially with an artist like Don Newton, who was the co-creator. Was he the co-creator? No, he took over for Infinity Inc. and had runs on Batman and like a legendary issue of the Phantom for Charlton. He was a very, very capable, great artist. Basically, did this as moonlighting. He was a school teacher and was still able to get some months up to 30 pages out per month. Between this and other series like Star Hunters, I mean, they're not all coming to me, but there's some impressive credits there. Died very young, I think like 43, 44. And they may have done like a Batman collection of his stuff. I'm not exactly sure, but it's an artist that I think should have a little more recognition from the Bronze Age than they do right now. So that's my recommendation on a variety of reasons. Shazam: The World's Mightiest Mortal, Volume 3.
Well, that's interesting because, like, again, classic Shazam to me has always been kind of steeped in that sort of not child
Yeah.
centric, but like,
Well,
quirky
it's the
and
ultimate child
fun
wish
and
fulfillment. The character's the
exactly,
ultimate. All I have to do is say a word, and almost all my problems go away, and I'm the hero.
exactly. And
Yeah,
I've got superpowers, and then
yeah,
my friends have superpowers,
yeah,
and everybody's got superpowers, and we're
yeah,
all doing, and it's fun. And some of
yeah.
the,
And if there is a problem, it's solved in 12 to 15 pages.
exactly,
Yeah,
which is pretty consistent with a lot of the other, like, the contemporary superhero comics at the time too. Like, you could get it all taken care of within 12, 15 pages of that story, and then you have another adventure that goes on right afterwards. It's fun. But I think Shazam, in my mind, the perception of Shazam is that it kind of stayed in that mode a lot longer than a lot of the other DC properties. And I'm wondering if maybe the reason for that is because it took them a while for them to kind of figure out how to integrate Shazam and Captain Marvel, like the Shazam family and Captain Marvel family, into the rest of the DC
Well,
universe.
part of that was some of the licensing complications
Mm.
because the character was actually licensed from Fawcett Comics. This is the weird
Oh,
dynamic at play here.
yeah.
Okay, just so people understand, DC sued Fawcett over Captain Marvel's similarities to Superman. DC won. Fawcett got out of the business. They basically could not print new Captain Marvel stories without DC's permission. Years later, DC approached Fawcett about licensing the character that they would produce stories, and they didn't buy the character outright until 1991.
Wow.
So
Well, that
there
makes
is a
sense.
window
Yeah.
where he was part of the Superpowers toy line, he was part of the Mego thing, but the full integration was a bit problematic for a time
Yeah.
because of some of the licensing agreements, and from what I understand from the accounting practices, it was easier for him to be separate
Yeah.
in terms of distribution of monies, and then if he was like part of a bigger concern like Justice League, like he eventually
Yeah.
was. Yeah,
Yeah. Justice Society, the Avengers. No.
the Justice Authority. Yeah.
Justice Society. Which is unfortunate. I think that kind of, unfortunately meant that he didn't rise to the level of, characters that people know a lot
Yeah.
about, like any of the rest of the DC
But there
characters,
was
even
a
though
point in the
he's in
70s
there.
where he was the fourth most licensed character
Yeah.
behind Superman, Batman, and Robin. And
And
then
yet,
Wonder Woman, and he kind of flip-flopped, but
mhm,
those are the main five characters. Throw in Aquaman just because of his presence in Super Friends, and that's who you thought of in terms of DC if you were not a reader in the 70s. Shazam was up there,
yeah,
but
Green Lantern also kind
this
of has that.
no, not then, not then. Green Lantern and
Really?
Flash, no, they were
Well, see,
not.
that's what I was thinking, because I remember they were part of the superpowers, but
Yeah,
they didn't have
I
that
was talking the
level.
70s. I was talking the 70s.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
80s was
yeah.
something different. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think they had that. They didn't get to
no,
that level until the
no.
80s and the 90s, and then of course Justice League cartoon, Justice League United, or whatever that is.
Well, that's much
Um,
later. That's much later.
yeah, much later, but that's where you get that's where you get a lot more recognition, I think, for Green Lantern anyway. But yeah, so going on to mine, I decided to look more for Mary Marvel, and luckily, Josie Campbell and Doc Shaner have come out with a miniseries just in the past several months, focusing solely on Mary herself, titled "The New Champion of Shazam," and this comic basically takes place after Dark Crisis, and Billy is no longer kind of on the map as Captain Marvel
Mhm.
or Shazam. He's on the Rock of Eternity. He's kind of trapped there, and that's just kind of where he's going to be. And no one has powers anymore. He's taken the powers back with him with Rock of Eternity. So the Shazam family are all back to being normal kids. And Mary, of course, is super excited about this because she finally gets to follow her dream. Because again, she's the most mature. She's the oldest, and she has plans. She has a life goal, and part of that is going to college, and she ends up going to Vassar. So she heads out, going to Vassar College, to be the hardworking, overachiever that she was all through high school, and that she brought to her superhero wing. But now she's just a regular person, and is gonna be a regular student and have fun and do all the crazy things that you can do at college. Except in day one, what happens? Her roommate's pet bunny rabbit, that she was just introduced to, appears in her bag during an opening lecture, and starts talking to her. Hoppy has become the messenger of Billy Batson, aka the new Wizard Shazam, and is letting her know that, hey, guess what? You got your powers back. And also, we need you to be the new champion on Earth, the new champion of the Wizard Shazam on Earth. And she's like, hell no. I've got life. I don't want to do any of that. I want to go to class and be, a normal person and not have to deal with any of this bull. Um, and I think the humor in this book is just a huge selling point for it. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I mean, here you've got the character of Hoppy being introduced, and Hoppy just loves carrots, and he's just so excited to work with Mary, and he needs to get those carrots. And Mary, of course, is like, "I'm done with this." Um, but then, of course, the worst happens. She finds out that Rosa and Victor, the her foster parents, have been missing. So basically, as soon as they dropped her off on the train to college, they never made it back home. And so, unfortunately, because she is the oldest and is essentially able to be a legal guardian, she has to come back to Philly and take care of the kids. And while she's there, she enrolls in a community college again. Lots of humor there. But during this time, she finds there's a lot more people missing. There's some superpowered baddies that are out there. There's some strange, monstrous creatures that are attacking people. And there's something up with them. Obviously, here's a giant, flying alligator crocodile creature that is clearly in pain and distress, that's been attacking people. Um, and she has to come. She has to figure out why. Interestingly enough, this also reintroduces the character of Uncle Dudley, um, which was a little bit of a surprise. Marv has not been seen, I think, since gosh, it's been 20 years.
I think the last time was in the Power of Shazam series, so that would have
Maybe
been late '90s.
late, yeah, so
Yeah.
almost 20 years. He was, of
Well,
course, an integral part of the Captain Marvel family. Like from the early days, he was the Uncle Dudley Shazam who wore the costume, didn't have any powers, and usually was comic relief. But he shows up here as a homeless or an unhoused sort of spokesperson
mhm.
for the people that are living in the tent city under in Philadelphia and in Fawcett City. So, this is a great 4-issue series. It has, a fun new villain that has connection to a classic Shazam villain. It's got a lot of humor. It's got family issues, a lot of internal conflict. Mary says the wrong thing, to Darla, and creates a little bit of a crisis there. But every time, her and her siblings, they turn it around and they find a way to work together to rescue the family, even though they don't have any powers anymore. She's the only one with powers, and I think that this is a great introduction to the character of Mary, but also to the what the Shazam family has kind of become, or maybe always was. In just here's some kids who happen to have powers, but also really work together as siblings, and find a
Mhm.
way to save the day. 4 issues, 4 and done, works perfectly and sets it up for what comes next with I think it led into Lazarus Planet, and then I forget what else is going to be coming
A
with
Mark
that.
Wade
But
written
there was
Shazam series.
yeah, Mark Wade is going to be returning to the Shazam series. So
He's never written it before.
well, not returning, but Shazam is returning to
Yeah.
its own series with it.
And in also keeping with the history of the character, his superhero name is the Captain.
The
Uh,
Captain.
so um, you got that second part you really can't use anymore. Um, but that's the way things go. I liked it. I didn't love it. There were things that I really liked about it. I really liked the depiction of college life and how upending that is when you're a freshman. I thought they got that completely correct.
I'm
Um,
Marina.
I would have really liked to have gotten Caleb's take on the depictions and the expressions of how the unhoused
Yeah,
were presented in here because it did seem to ring true to me.
yeah,
Especially with Uncle Marv. It's interesting. You just cut out L and baby.
yeah.
You got his almost his regular name. I'd love to see that character again, and I'd love to see how he would be interacting with the other members of the Shazam family. I think that was a really good way of reintroducing the
Mhm.
character, given where we were with the character after the reintroduction during the New 52. of the
Yeah.
Shazam family. I saw who the villain was a mile away, but I'm old.
Well, I mean, I knew who the villain, which character was the villain as soon
But
as
I
they
also
were
knew who she
introduced.
was. I also knew who
See,
she
I didn't know
but
that moment
you're
until
also
they revealed the whole
you're
thing.
also talking about somebody who bought a copy of Shazam #8 in 1973. So there's things I liked about it. I love the family dynamic. I hope that the set of characters, let's put it, does have a chance at, like, an extended, like, 40 or so issues. Is that
Yeah.
that's the second issue?
That's a
Yeah,
number 2,
yeah,
yeah, that has sort of,
that's in one of these boxes here.
yeah.
But I love Doc Shaner's art.
Mhm.
Perfect for Shazam.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect for Shazam. I know this miniseries did have a bit of a troubled history. It was solicited and then canceled, and even when it was moving, there were substantial delays. It was effectively a bi-monthly book instead of a monthly book. And I know the ending was changed. Perhaps there were plans for Mary to be in much more of a leadership position in the DC universe, stemming out of this series. But it's always been an interesting character. She is every bit as worthy of the captain mantle as Billy is,
Mhm.
as far as I've seen. And there were many moments in that seminal Power Shazam series by Jerry Ordway where that was the case. And she's like, "Well, why can there be only one captain? Military doesn't have one captain. I'm looking forward to what we see more. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it didn't knock my socks off, and it did have a bit of a placeholder feel, but I don't know how much of that placeholder feel was organic and recalibrated because of some of the developments that have happened since.
I think, I mean, when you look at what's going on, if you were just to read this, Tony came back up. Wasn't she originally solicited to be in the Justice League, but replaced by Supergirl? Um, that's possibility. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I've never heard that.
hmm,
Um, I do know when they did have Shazam appear,
yeah,
Captain Marvel in Justice League Unlimited, that's one of the best episodes of the series. That's one of the absolute best episodes of the series. Um, no, I've never heard that. I've heard the Barda replacement in
yeah,
Batman Beyond, no, but I've never heard of that before. Um,
yeah. Hmm.
you
I
I'm
mean,
trying
it
to
would
think.
make.
There is one use of her I forgot about was in the. I can't believe it's not the Justice League where DeMatteis and Giffen returned to the Blaha Justice League, and she filled one of the roles then.
Huh, yeah.
And we also had the Dark Mary with was it 52? I mean
Uh,
Countdown. Was it in Countdown? Yeah,
yeah, that
something
sounds
around
about
that. Yeah,
that time. Yeah, that time frame.
yeah. Where Desaad
Dark
got his
Mary.
shit on her. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like you do.
It's Gail Simone's second favorite character after Batgirl.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to see her tackle her at some point.
I mean, she deserves to have a little bit more of a solo light. I know that Shazam itself kind of lends itself to
Yeah,
being a very, family oriented team, sort of like it's a built-in team.
yeah,
Um, but Shazam, the captain, tends to go off on his own and join other teams and do all their things, and the rest of the family kind of stays behind.
hmm
So, maybe this is an opportunity for her to kind of be off on her own, um, outside of being in his orbit, which
yeah.
tends to be kind of how the rest of the family gets relegated. Like
Okay.
you can't have Captain Marvel Jr. or Captain Jr. You can't have Freddie Freeman without having the captain around.
What did they call him for us time? CM3.
I can't
Yeah,
remember. There are
and
some
in
other
recently in Young Justice, Mary was Sergeant Marvel
Sergeant
or the Sergeant.
Marvel.
Yeah,
Sarge.
yeah.
Uh, chomping on a cigar, wearing that hat. Yeah.
No.
Mary. Sergeant Slaughter.
You're
Mary.
nauseating. Jesus.
Uh.
All right, this never fails. You have expectations and they bust you. This has been a year of nothing news in comic books, but here's the news. Steve, why don't you tell us the one thing that I pointed out, because there is a Shazam connection with this.
Well, so
That was the weirdest
I
way anyone ever said Shazam. Shazam.
Shazamanish.
Yeah.
So like the specifics of this are kind of interesting. I'm trying to think what precipitated this. Like from the original news article here, there were some issues, haha, issues with a recent printing of Justice Society of America collections, one of volume 5 specifically, where there was some issues with the issues and how they're presented in the collection. They were unfortunately printed in the wrong order. And when you have a collected volume, that's supposed to be, whether it's an omnibus or whether it's just a story put together in single, it doesn't bode well if you can't put those chapters in the order that they're supposed to be read when you're presenting a collected edition. And it was, what was it? It was definitely, it was number 5.
Yeah,
Um,
which is a reissue of the Black Rain
right.
storyline, which involves specifically Black Adam, Hawkman, and Shazam.
Yeah.
What do
Where
you know? You've been in movies lately.
and unfortunately, it was printed in the absolute wrong order. Let's see. The order that they have listed here, Bleeding Cool went down the list. It was supposed to be JSA 56, Hawkman 23, JSA 57, Hawkman 24, JSA 58, and Hawkman 25. So JSA Hawkman, JSA Hawkman, JSA Hawkman. Unfortunately, it was printed in the wrong order. JSA number 56, Hawkman number 24, Hawkman number 23, JSA 58, JSA 57, and then finally Hawkman number 25. So the first and last chapters are in the right order. Everything else is just messed up. And so now it doesn't make any sense if you open the book and had no idea that it was wrong. You'd be reading chapter 5 before you read chapter 2, or chapter 3 before chapter 2. It's just an absolute mess. And we were talking right before the show started, where the last time that we had a very minor misprinting in a
Well, I
collection.
wouldn't say it was the last
Mi-
time, but it was an example that I cited that there
yeah.
was a situation, I would say about 15 years ago, maybe
Hmm.
about 15 years ago, where there were 2 pages of a Hawkman archive edition that were switched. 2 pages of a story. And because of that, that editor was fired from DC Comics. That's the story,
Yeah.
That's supposedly what went down. And over the last few months, toxic fanboys are kind of cheering when Marvel and DC are cutting their staffs rather dramatically. Well, this is what happens when
Yeah.
this is what happens. This one kind of baffles me to a larger extent than it would if it was a new compilation
Hmm.
where all they had to do was take the plates from the previous edition and whatever new dressing went around it for the reprinting.
Yeah.
You didn't have much to do. So I don't even know like how this happened, but it just felt like something worth talking about, that there should be almost sympathetic outrage over this.
Yeah.
Are they so short-staffed on collected editions that stuff like this is getting through the cracks? There were points where there were like, 6 or 7 editors on collected editions. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the case right now. I doubt it.
No. No, it seems like, in terms of proofing it and doing the things that you normally do before you go and send something to the printers, if they're eliminating positions like that, or if the people that are in those roles are basically pulling triple, quadruple duty, which is what always happens when, when staffs are reduced. People who are left behind have to basically make up slack.
Mhm.
They have to pick
Yeah.
up all those other responsibilities, and unfortunately, this is just not not a great look, unfortunately. But it's disheartening. Hopefully, they're able to do a reissue on this, but it could be expensive to recall. Um,
Mhm.
already printed books. So, was this a hardcover? Was this a hardcover reprinting?
No, I
You
think it was
know?
a trade. I think it was a
Okay,
soft cover.
so maybe not
Not
as
that it
expensive.
matters.
I mean, it's
Actually,
still an
Steve, the
expense.
price differential is not that different from putting a
Mm.
hardcover out between. I mean, I'm sure, something like an omnibus, that there is a substantial price difference for that, but it really isn't.
$150.
It really isn't. But no, but we're talking about the cost of doing this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't think it's that big, and the main reason that you were seeing more and more hardcovers come 2002, 2003 was because of libraries.
yeah.
Whether there's enough of a justification for another printing, who knows? But for replacement copies, but I can't imagine, sitting down to reading that and just being, you know,
Confused and
yeah,
not understanding why.
sometimes things happen by accident. This is my favorite story about that.
Hmm.
Before Jerry Orbach died, he was doing a lot of audiobooks, and he did a lot of audiobooks for James Elroy books, and I love James Elroy stuff.
Hmm.
And he did the audiobook for this book that's in the Los Angeles trilogy, White Heat. And at some point, he switched the voices of two of the characters that he was reading. And no one ever caught that. And I'm listening to it. It's like, wait a second, he wasn't at that party. It was like that kind of thing. And so things can happen by accident, and people just don't catch it.
Yeah,
This seems like negligence, but it's not one where I want to like shake my finger at DC. I want to say, hey, what's going on? I hope it I hope it resolves itself, because this continued stuff like this will have an effect on the market, and the confidence of people buying editions like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly, and especially for something that could be cross promoted pretty easily with with Black Adam, and now that Black Adam has been on streaming services and it's available for Blu-ray. I mean, people who didn't catch it in the theater, maybe caught in the theater and want to read more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is unfortunate. They do better looking for an older printing, an older edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it for news. Unfortunately, there's not a
It's not,
lot.
I mean, there's really
Not a
nothing,
lot.
it's amazing.
It's before like the big con season, I guess, breaks. Where all the announcements happen. We did get a lot
There
the
were some
last
things
month.
we could have talked about. We didn't talk about Wonder Woman, that's now
No.
going to be written by Tom King, which I
Oh
think is
yeah,
a
yeah.
very good development. So there have been some developments.
And the
Um,
restart,
we,
they're
we
they're
probably,
restarting their numbering, which
yeah.
is
Oh, oh, people with the renumbering,
it's
Jesus.
a good jumping on point.
Here,
Oh, it's
you
a
know
number
what?
one.
Here you go. Here you go. This is called a marker, okay? And you can write on whatever number you want.
That terrified me, by the way, when you had the marker so
Oh,
close to that cover.
I would never do that.
Oh, it's
But
ruined.
I hate people. I hate people. I'm devastated. No, you're devastated when somebody in your family dies, not because Action 499 is now Action number one. Shut up.
My childhood is ruined.
Well,
Ruined.
well, you know
Ruined.
what? You know what? You know what? Your adulthood's ruined. If this is an issue for you.
Ugh.
Oh boy.
Well, hey, I actually have a geekette. I have
Wow.
a I have a geekette.
All right, let's hear about it.
I have Spider-Man, also known. So, for those of you who are confused, this is Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 18, is it? I think. Um,
No, 19.
19, Amazing
19.
Spider-Man 19. Can't you tell? So, recently, Marvel's been putting out these special variant cover editions, and
I'm gonna
Will get
show
his
my
as well.
copy because I think I have less shine here than you do,
Shine.
and you can
Ooh,
see what that is there. Okay.
Um, but clearly, so it's a version of the Fantastic Four #1 cover, with obviously the Mickey, Mickey and Friends characters in those roles. And Marvel's been putting out these variant editions for the 100th anniversary of Disney. or technically, I guess, the 100 Years of Mickey Mouse, for the issues, the current ongoing of Amazing Spider-Man. The problem, I think, for some people is that they aren't numbered very clearly on the front, so you may not know exactly what you're getting unless you're aware of which variant covers which. But they've been offering them as well through the Disney Insiders app, which is something that Bill and I, every week on Wednesday they'll have like a special special thing, a knickknack, a poster, a Funko Pop, a keychain, and recently it's been these variant covers. And so I got one for Spider-Man 17,
Yep.
and
Which was
then
the
this one,
Avengers. Yep.
yeah, the Avengers.
Yeah. And
But
I
it was
just
like
hope
a
they
limited
keep on
series.
coming. We've talked about
Yeah,
the Insider program a couple times,
yeah, yeah.
mostly showing off our Funko Pops.
And it's worth it. I mean, if you're gonna
Yeah.
go see these movies anyway, you might as well get like some free points for doing it, and then get some free stuff,
Yep.
out of it.
And also, I think we mentioned this last time. If you are a Disney Plus subscriber, you get automatic points, and with those
Mhm.
points, that's like a free gift every 3 months anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, yeah,
It's worth it. Yeah.
do it, do
You go
it.
see a movie, you get like 150, 200 points per
Almost,
ticket, something crazy
depending
like
upon
that.
what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what about your geek gets, Bill? Because I know
Well,
you've got more than me.
well, no, no. Again, we were kind of putting the brakes on because there have been some times we've had geek gets that have gone on for half an hour. So we're basically only showing off like one or two things now. But last time around, we both showed off geek gets from Ollie's. That were omnibus editions that we got for dirt cheap. Well, I got some for even dirtier cheap, if that's a phrase, and from a dirtier, cheaper store. First
Hmm.
time in a long time I've seen graphic novels at Dollar Tree.
Gasp.
So, yes, so I got Green Lantern Secret Origin. Yes, it's the Ryan Reynolds cover, but it's the Secret Origin arc from the 2006 series or whatever.
Oh,
Um,
nice, nice. Yeah.
so that's reprinted. And I also got the first volume of Fairest, which was the
Uh,
Fables spinoff.
mhm.
This actually they did have to check my age on this because this was mature audiences. This one, but
Gasp.
for Dollar Tree prices, of course I have these in single issue format, but I could not pass these up for the price.
Yeah,
So that's my geek gets, and so
that's pretty
that's
cool. I'll,
also
I'll check
making
that out.
me be very cognizant of needing to check Dollar Trees for this kind of material because that would be great. It would be great if they unload a lot of because there's still stuff at Ollie's that doesn't sell through at their discounted prices. So, um,
Absolutely. And Ollie's does have they're getting frequently they'll have those sort of premium edition, discounted books, hardcovers like the, Batman, Superman in the 40s and the 50s, those things.
or
Uh,
the Monsters
or
Unleashed.
the giant monsters unleashed, coffee table size. Just slap some legs on it, and you've got yourself a coffee table. And those
Oh
and
god,
those.
I gotta put this in the right place because everything's gonna fall. Look at that. Oh my god.
but yeah, I mean, hey, I every year I'm pretty famous for filling up a book bag full of a backpack full of cheap graphic novels and trades that I get from Heroes Con or any convention that I go
Mhm.
to, where they're $5 or less, and I'll just fill up a whole bag full. But it's nice when you can go to the store at any time of the year and get those too.
Yeah, I do hope that's something I see more and more of. 'Cause,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, but cool.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to wrap this one up again. This was not going to be as long an episode as we normally do, but we're still almost at the 90-minute point because God
Gee.
knows we can yap. So we're going to wrap up this show. And when we wrap it up an episode, let's do it again for the audio. I did pretty good being sick today, I got to say. And I look like crap. Um, I was having a good hair day. Now it's not a good hair night. Well, thank you very much. My partner said I look handsome. So.
Oh.
The hair's not. The hair's. I've been better. Let's do it again for the audio. So we're gonna wrap up an episode when we.
I'll put myself on mute.
No, don't. No. Put just. You might have to save me, please. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this after all this time? Why don't you?
I
I bet
oh,
you
I
can't
can't
do it.
do it right.
All right, then
I
I'll do
can't
it.
do it right.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up this episode. And when we wrap up an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar where we woof at something that may be a comic or a TV program or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
My woof of the week is for Essex County, the show. And I would put a graphic up here, but unfortunately it made it change. It doesn't look right. But so Essex County by Jeff Lemire was a trilogy of graphic novels that he put out. Oh gosh, I think at this point, like 15 years ago, maybe, that were about some individual characters that were related by blood or by circumstance in a small rural Ontario county called the Essex County Trilogy. Collected, you can now find it as Essex County, but they did turn it into a TV series. It's a five episode miniseries that Jeff Lemire is the showrunner for and is one of the main writers. So he was able to, keep the story the way and present it the way that he wanted to on film. It's got a great cast to it. It's on CBC on Sundays. It's being released on the next 4 Sundays. It just premiered on the 19th. It is hard to find outside of Canada right now. It is streaming on CBC Gem, which is their free streaming service. If you're in Canada or if you have a VPN and can pretend you're in Canada, you can watch it. It is absolutely gorgeous. The acting is wonderful, and true to the book, it had me tearing up and crying within the first few minutes of the introduction. So I think that this is going to be a wonderful show if you can see it. Hopefully, it'll be optioned in the US. It has not been announced on who would be carrying it stateside or outside of Canada at this point. But hopefully, maybe Amazon Prime, Netflix, HBO Max, one of those services would be nice.
Great. Well, my Wolf of the Week is also a streaming miniseries. It's the Amazon Prime series Daisy Jones and the Six. And this is based on the 2019 novel of the same name by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it covers a band in 1997 that have been broken up for 20 years after their last performance together. And the concept is a docu-series that interviews the band and discusses their history and their eventual breakup. They've had 8 episodes that have aired so far. The last 2 episodes are airing tomorrow. So that is going to be a viewing priority for me. Daisy Jones and the Six is primarily based on Fleetwood Mac, though there are some references to histories of other artists like Linda Ronstadt and, believe it or not, Deep Purple and the Eagles. So there's references other than Fleetwood Mac. Wendy Freeman, our friend, was worried it was just going to be like Fleetwood Mac fanfic. So just that phrase kind of fascinated me for a few days.
That's
Daisy
fantastic.
Jones is played by Riley Keough, and if you see some facial similarities there, she's actually Elvis Presley's granddaughter.
Oh,
And though she's not exactly a heavyweight actress, man, she inherited Grandpappy's charm in some ways. The other person in this shot there is Sam Claflin as Billy, who was the founder of the Six. As somebody for me, like I would say 60% of my viewing these days are documentaries, and to have a fake documentary like this, oh, perfect. Oh, it's like it was like saying, Bill, this is for you. And as I said, it's a 10 episode series. The final 2 episodes premiere tomorrow. I very much recommend this. Daisy Jones and the Six on Amazon Prime.
awesome.
And that's it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Sorry it was a little bit of a disjointed show, but health issues and tech issues, but especially with some of the circumstances surrounding Shazam Fury of the Gods, we really wanted to get this episode out. And on that positive note, again, this has been the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to listen to us, you can do so by listening to us, actually downloading us still through Apple Podcasts, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, and many of the other podcasting platforms. If you joined us through Facebook Live tonight, thank you. If you are watching this later on YouTube, thank you for doing that. Please like and subscribe, and we'll be seeing you real soon. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
And I'm Steve Morey.
If you're listening, you're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Wolf.